Hi, welcome to this segment of World War II Legacies. This is a series of interviews that I'm conducting with family members of World War II veterans that I've interviewed. My name is Kayleen Reusser. The people you will meet and hear about are among some of the World War II veterans that I've interviewed over the past decade. Unfortunately, most of these people are gone now, but we can still learn about their service through some of the books that I've written about them, and you will hear about one of those today. I also do speaking events in person and Zoom, and I'll put some of the contact information in the show notes below. I also have a new way for us to learn about veterans, and that's through meeting the people who knew them best, and that was their children. So we'll get a little bit of a behind the scenes look at what it was like to grow up with a World War II veteran as a parent. We'll ask some questions like, what were some of the benefits to growing up with a World War II veteran, or what were some of the challenges? I should mention that I am a proud Air Force wife and mother, and I have written all these books and done all the speaking and all the research because I so much believe in our country, that we have a great country, and I believe in helping to preserve our national military heritage. Every person who has put on a uniform and signed their name away to Uncle Sam has a story to tell. And the only way that we're going to be able to keep our country great is by hearing these stories, remembering them, and then emulating these same ideals of self-sacrifice and keeping the ideals established by our founding fathers. Today we're discussing a World War II veteran named Granville Grant Workman, and we have with us Grant's daughter, Judy Johnson. Welcome, Judy.
Thank you.
It's pretty unusual for me to even know one of the children of a vet that I've interviewed, let alone living close. But as it happened a few years ago, Judy came upon a journal that her dad had put together about his time of service as a POW in a Japanese camps during World War II. And she shared that journal with a mutual friend of ours, Sue Harris. Sue told me about the journal, and Judy and I got in contact. Judy shared a copy of the journal with me, and it was so enthralling that I felt like I had to do something with that. So I combined that story with 7 others to put this book together. Captured Stories of American World War II Prisoners of War. Now, normally, all of these books that I've put together are stories of men and women that I've interviewed. Unfortunately, I couldn't interview Grant Workman because he died in 1998. Now, the other men that I've interviewed as part of this book, the 7 others, I did interview. There was 6 of them who were in the German camps, and 1 other man who served behind bars, you could say, with the Japanese. But we'll talk a little bit more about some of the entries in this book in just a few minutes. But first of all, we're just going to ask Judy, what was it like growing up? Tell us where you grew up and your family members.
I had a younger brother, 10 years younger, and I was born in Plymouth.
Plymouth, Indiana?
Plymouth, Indiana. Eventually we moved to Bluffton.
Bluffton, Indiana.
My brother was born in Kokomo, and then we moved to Bluffton for my junior year of high school. And so my dad was working for National Oil and Gas, and that's how I ended up here.
Okay, very good. And that's how we met. Now, what did you know about your dad's military service growing up?
Nothing. Absolutely nothing.
Okay.
It was not discussed by Mom or Dad.
Did you know he had been in the war?
Yes, I did know he had been in the service. I knew he had joined at the age of 15.
Okay.
But that's about it.
Okay.
And that he had been a prisoner of war.
And so he didn't have his medals out, and we'll hold some of those up here. This is really heavy, so I'm gonna hold 2 hands. You didn't know about any of these or have them up on a shadow box in your house?
Not till after I was married, and he put a lot of stuff up.
Okay, let me show, or can you point to the Purple Heart over here so people can see which medal is the Purple Heart?
Right
That
here.
means that he sustained injuries, and we'll talk about some of those during war, and the Prisoner of War medal. Could you point to that one?
There.
That's very distinctive. You know, there wouldn't have been, of the war, 16 million men and women put on the uniform during World War II. Only 120,000 were part of the POWs who spent part of the war in camps, enemy camps.
He spent most of his.
Yes. He
Service
actually
in
went in, well, he had a very unusual story. I have, like I said, interviewed others, but he had more of an unusual story than anybody else, because as you said, he went in at age 15, which was way before you were supposed to be age 18.
Right about his age.
Or 17 with a parent's permission. So he went in, he was actually in the military before
Before Pearl Harbor.
before Pearl Harbor, the Japanese bombed. So he was approximately 16 then when he was taken prisoner in April of 1942. He is, let me just read a couple of the things here, because he was not well educated. He quit school, very young age, and yet I was so amazed when when I read his journal at some of the entries, because they're so descriptive and evocative. This is the opening paragraph for his story in the book, and I will say this is no doubt the longest story because it's primarily his journal in completion. I really only changed a few things like grammar, and there wasn't even that many grammar errors, but this was one of the quotes I felt was very strong. No one can imagine what it would be like to be interned in a prison camp for 3 years, to be beaten and tortured, worked to the point of exhaustion daily, and to live in filth and disease. I was one of the few who marched into one of those hellholes and marched out a survivor. So he wrote that. He would have been 16 when he was captured, so he was very, very young. And much of the journal at the beginning talks about him running through the jungle, evading capture. Sometimes he was alone, sometimes he was with other American soldiers, just trying to figure out what was going on. They didn't know where they were. And it was quite amusing. Sometimes he would say that sometimes they'd just run into another enemy soldier right in front of him in the jungle. Okay, so let's see. One of the other questions, I said, I don't know if I asked, did your mother know anything about his service?
Yes.
Okay, but she didn't discuss it with you at all?
No.
Okay, and now, what happened to change all that? You talked to me a little bit about one time he asked you to go somewhere with him. Tell us about that.
Some of his buddies that he had remained close with, that had been in prison with him, talked to him to get him to start going to ex-POW conventions in Fontana Dam, North Carolina. And it was a godsend. It helped him to start talking about a little bit of it. He asked my family to go along. We were able to hear some of them talking, the horror stories, and understood a little bit more, not enough, but more of who he was and how he got to that point.
And what decade was all of this? Was this in the 70s?
That had to be in the 70s, yes.
Okay. So quite a long time after the war had ended.
Yes.
Okay, and you were married with a child, I think you
Yes.
said. Okay. All right, so how did you feel hearing some of those stories? Was it just pretty startling?
Yeah, it was. I mean, I was young. I didn't realize. We studied the World War II, in school, but it was a lot more, smack dab in the face.
Yeah, pretty crude when it's
Yeah.
right in front of you. Okay, and then the journal, it was handwritten, is
Yes.
that right? Okay.
He wrote that when he had nightmares, which he had a lot of nightmares, I understood. And that's when he would get up and write this stuff down.
Okay.
It
But
helped-
you didn't know about
No.
that until
No.
you got the journal.
But it helped him, I
Okay.
guess, get it off his chest.
If I could, I'd like to read a couple more entries in here. Grant had the unusual, not the greatest, experience of seeing the American flag come down twice during the war. And I just bet there aren't very many soldiers of the 16 million that ever saw it come down twice. So let me just read that here. In March of 1942, he has an entry. We were at Cobbin Inland at Manila Bay when informed that General MacArthur had obeyed an order to evacuate to Australia with his family. At that point, we seemed to be fighting a losing battle. General Jonathan Wainwright was the new commander of the armies of the Philippines, and he appointed General Edward King to command the forces of Bataan. Japanese bombers pounded our positions from morning to night. Let's see here. Finally, on April 9th, 1942, it was over. After months of resistance, faced with no reinforcements and lack of food and ammunition, General King offered to negotiate the surrender of the Bataan forces. A month later, battling the same obstacles, Wainwright also conceded defeat. Word arrived to lay down arms and surrender. It was tough seeing the American flag go down and the Japanese flag go up. I had thought living as a prisoner could not be worse than what we had gone through, with a serious lack of food, always on the run, and a lack of supplies. I was never more wrong. And then he did escape from the Bataan Death March. He was part of that, but he escaped, but then unfortunately was recaptured. So he was, let's see here, the base fell to the Japanese on May 6, 1942. From my hiding place, I watched for the second time as the American flag was replaced by a Japanese one. It felt like losing your mother or father. When your country's flag goes down, you don't have much help. And then right after that was when he was captured. And talking about details that he included, it was so interesting. As a prisoner, and I don't know if I'm saying it right, Cabanatuan, have you ever heard that? Or Cabanatuan?
Cabachachuan.
It's a mouthful.
It's Chuan, he pronounced it at the end.
In June of 42, when he arrived as part of the work details, he was assigned to gardening. And it was brutally hot. To make the time pass, we sang as we worked, and they were trying to raise vegetables. When the early sunbeams break, you will wonder when you wake in what muddy neighborhood there is work and pleasant food. Planting rice is no fun. Work from morning to the setting of the sun. Cannot stand, cannot sit, cannot rest a little bit. Oh, my back is about to break, and my bones with the damp still ache. And my feet are wet and set with long soaking in the wet. And that was a song that they created to help them get through that very difficult, those chores that were just really, really challenging. So we've got times when he was very ill. He was practically dead one time, and he was saved by a friend, but this was in February of 1943. He contracted diphtheria, was admitted to the camp hospital, which wasn't much. He recovered, but after effects set in which were almost worse than the disease. His inability to swallow kept him from eating his even little portions of rice and sweet potato vine soups. His weight plummeted to 87 pounds. Now, this is a teenage boy. He should have been in the best health of his life. He had double vision. His legs and head swelled. Paralysis set in, allowing only his head, feet, and hands to move. He would have perished throughout this period of illness if not for a prisoner named Harrington. This American POW suffered from dry beriberi. His feet hurt so badly he could barely walk. Yet Harrington managed to go to the hospital each day to feed me. When I prayed to die, he offered encouraging words. One night during my hospitalization, an American captain came around to check for dead prisoners. He told his orderly to throw me under the barracks for burial detail in the morning. Harrington told him I was not dead. The captain replied, "He will be soon." When the orderly did as directed, Harrington dragged me, inch by inch, back into the barracks. He could hardly get around, but he refused to leave me. It must have taken hours. Somehow I survived. Unfortunately, I have no idea what became of Harrington. Now, not only did Grant serve in the Philippines, he also was in Japan in the coal mining camps. And that was all new to me. I had never even heard of that before. So Judy, do you want to point to some of these pictures here and tell us anything you know about them? First of all, where did you get these? Or your dad, where did he get those?
I don't know.
Oh, okay, maybe
He
at
put
the,
this together.
Okay.
This is probably from Fontana Dam right here.
okay, one of the reunions.
But I don't know where he got all these. Now this is his friend that lived in Tennessee, modeling the, that's the only
loincloth.
garb they had for the coal mines.
He was one of the men who invited him to come to
Yes.
the reunions.
Yes, very good friend, thank God for him. But a lot of time they had to ask the Japanese if they could go to the bathroom while they were working, and a lot of times they would say no. So they were forced to soil themselves and wear it that way. This is my dad right here, one of his pictures. This is the coal mines up here. These are some of the Japanese that took. I can't say took care of them. We're watching over them,
The guards.
the guards.
Okay,
Yeah.
very difficult to look at those, I would
Yeah.
think. Well, the thing I want to make known was that he had a very unusual story. He did come home and he was welcomed back into his family. He had actually, I don't know that we mentioned, he had actually run away because he had a difficult home life.
Yes.
But he returned to his family, he returned to his home, and somehow worked through his life. He had a very successful, he was able to work. I don't know how he had
For
anything
never
left.
finishing high school,
Mm-hmm.
he never got a GED.
Okay. I wondered about that.
He was blessed.
Why do you want people to know your dad's story and read this book? Why do you want them to do that? What does it mean to you?
Because people need to know what really happened and how life was. He protected America, he loved our American flag, and the way our world is right now, I think they need to know what our military have gone through to protect us, and now we're kind of being beaten down.
And we're letting those freedoms go.
We're letting those freedoms go, and we don't have a say-so on anything, as far as I'm concerned.
I can't remember, but this is Grant's picture right here on the cover. So Judy thinks that this picture was taken after he came home.
Yeah.
So this would have been at 3 years after he had served in brutal conditions. He was probably still maybe only 19 or 20 years old here. So he wasn't smiling, but we can understand why. So do you want to show any of these plaques here, or certificates?
This is, his unit was called the Battling Bastards of Bataan. That was his crest. he has that. He's got a certificate of appreciation here.
From who? Who's this from? It's too small for me.
Yeah, me too.
Oh, goodness. I think it's from the military.
It's the National World War II Memorial that
Okay.
Mom signed him up for this after
Okay.
it was put up. That was one of his problems, was that the Vietnam Memorial was started way before this ever was.
So he didn't get to see
So
it.
he never got to see it.
Unfortunately.
But my son did take us to see it.
Oh, good.
My mom.
Good.
So that's
Okay.
basically it.
All right. Well, I wanted to thank Judy and her husband, who is also a veteran, for bringing over these things today so that we could do this program together. Our goal is just to make sure that history is being told accurately. We're not trying to rewrite it. We can't make everything perfect, but we still serve a great country, and we're doing our best to make sure it stays that way. Thank you to every veteran watching and your family, because I know it takes your support staff to make sure you can do a good job. We'll see you next time. Thank you.